Hello, everyone. My name is Clinton Johnson. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm one of the founders and leaders of the NorthStar of GIS. I'm also a member of Blacks United in Leading Technology Forward, or BUILT, and I lead BUILT's Philadelphia chapter. And I'm very excited to have all of you with us today as we continue a month-long discussion on mapping Black health and wellness. In today's event, we'll focus on mapping justice, a course initially developed through MOSTech out of MIT. Before we get too far ahead into the programming, we want to make sure we talk a little bit about the North Star of GIS. We're a 501c3 organization that strives for a more racially just world through a more racially just GIS. And since 2017, we've delivered engaging events and workshops for over 2,000 guests, showcasing dozens of Black students and professionals sharing innovative business and social impact solutions. Essentially, we're here to help leaders, help educators, and help everyday people advance intersectional anti racism and increase belonging for Black people and other marginalized groups. At NorthStar of GIS, our programming includes the NorthStar Bridge, a program that connects Black students at HBCUs with opportunities in GIS. There's NorthStar Guides, a library of content and services to help individuals and organizations lead the way to racial justice and belonging through a GIS lens. There's our new program, the North Star Telescope, that's launching today. Make sure if you see the link to add yourself. If you're a Black star in GIS, whether as a student in college or somewhere along the journey to the C-suite, we want to magnify you. And the program that's delivering this event today is called North Star Events, our platform for showcasing Black GIS talent as well as tech for intersectional racial justice. Our Mapping Black Health and Wellness series includes the following sessions. We had an opening session to begin the whole conversation about the implications of Black representation and in mapping, analyzing, and informing policy for health and wellness. There was Historic Black Communities, Preserving and Caring, where we shared a few examples of how GIS is being used to preserve Black history and we discussed what it means and what it feels like to really do that kind of work. And today's event, a spotlight on mapping justice, a course developed initially through MOSTech, which is a part of MIT's Office of Engineering outreach programs. Our Black History Month series is also a rallying cry for our partners. So there were some other great events by Unity and Power at Here Technologies. And we've also included one final event to close out the series and kick off a month-long conversation, a year-long conversation. So we've added a closing keynote to wrap up our Black History Month series. Dr. Leslie Cadet will help send us off into the rest of the year, ready to discuss and advance racial justice and our efforts towards to map more equitable outcomes in Black health and wellness. And again, all of you are here today for our spotlight on mapping justice. And in addition to myself, today's conversation features speakers from Mapping Justice. Um, and today we'll learn more about the future of that initiative from one of the founders of Trouble & Co. Trouble & Co. is a new organization championing the next generation of innovators to disrupt society for the better. Now, I'll let our speakers tell you more about, themselves, the great work that they've done in their organizations. But before this conversation goes too far, I'm sure lots of you are interested in exploring what we mean when we say mapping Black health and wellness. Well, for starters, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History was established in 1915 and was instrumental in bringing Black History Week and later Black History Month into reality. They've set the theme for annual Black History conversations ever since 1928. This year's theme acknowledges the legacy of Black scholars, Black medical practitioners, and other ways of knowing. A few examples of other ways of knowing being birth workers, midwives, herbalists, and so on. The theme considers activities, rituals, and initiatives that Black communities have done to be well across the entire diaspora, across time. So, what does any of that have to do with mapping and why does it matter? Well, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention has acknowledged that health equity considerations for racial groups include so many unfortunate realities of racial discrimination that exists in the world today that ultimately impact how people experience health and wellness, how people get access to services that should support health and wellness, and how they experience those services. More and more individuals and organizations are working to use maps to understand and take action to tackle these really critical issues. Territorial Empathy in New York used maps analysis and storytelling to raise awareness of racial disparities impacting Black, African American, and Latin American communities in New York. You can find so many other resources of so many other examples of other organizations advancing equity on websites like Esri's Racial Equity and Social Justice website, where they have a great racial equity hub. There are many individuals working in and outside of organizations that are trying to study and take action to address a wide range of racial disparities in health and wellness. And Trouble and Co. and Mapping Justice is one of those kinds of organizations. But unfortunately, these conversations and the actions that we need are not always at the center of the work to increase positive health outcomes. NorthStar of GIS seeks to elevate conversations about representation of Black people in particular, but other people from other marginalized racial groups as well. We seek to elevate these discussions and make sure that action to take racial equity into account is central in the work of GIS, geography, and policymaking. And by representation, we mean people of the entire Black or Black African diaspora from a wide range of backgrounds. That includes people of many intersectional racial identities, ethnic identities, folks with different connections to indigeneity, uh, many different gender identities, transgender identities, sexual orientations, a wide range of ages, socioeconomic backgrounds, people from all experiences. And we seek racial equity at the intersection of all systems of oppression, including sexism, heterosexism, ageism, ableism, and more. So when we say we seek a more racially just world through a more racially just GIS, we mean we're looking to help orchestrate a global GIS industry and a global GIS community that reflects the full richness of Black communities and experiences worldwide. And we mean a global GIS industry and community of practice that embraces intersectional racial equity as a primary motivator and a primary criteria for mapping, analysis, and spatial enablement. And now let's get started with our event. I want to introduce Nick Okafor, a strategist and design researcher. Um, he's a senior associate at Sidewalk Labs, Alphabet's urban innovation company, where he drives commercialization for urban incubations, piloting and scaling emerging products that improve quality of life through design and technology. He's also the creator and instructor of Mapping Justice, where he guides underrepresented youth in STEM about how to design geospatial tools for social change. He advocates for for a radical rethinking of the tools used to create a more just and more equitable society, and believes that technology paired with inclusive design and engagement can disrupt the sector for the better. I'll let Nick tell you a bit more about Mapping Justice and tell you a little bit more about himself. So let me welcome to the stage, Nick. How are you doing, Nick?
Doing pretty well. Can everyone hear me all right? Wonderful, wonderful. So glad to be here today.
Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Mapping Justice and what really inspired you to get started with that work and what's the program about?
Of course. And so Mapping Justice came out of the MOSTEC program, out of MIT's Office of Engineering Outreach Programs. Through that, their core mission there is how are you tackling the issue of diversity within STEM? What are you doing to address the pipeline and making sure that there is plenty of people who can see representation in themselves and potential STEM fields? Mapping Justice takes that and goes beyond and really thinks about the ways that you can really take not only diversity in STEM, but ways that you're incorporating inclusion and justice. In the course, we make sure that we're teaching technical skills to our youth. And so we're working with minority high school youth, and we're going through and we're learning GIS, geospatial tools, they're making maps and dashboards. We're having incredible conversations around the intersection of race, power, and technology. And then at the end, really focus on implementation. So the students are making maps and dashboards around areas that they really care about. And so what we're going to see today is a couple of highlights of some great projects that the students have worked on over the past couple of years that really tackle various facets of Black wellness and health.
That was great, Nick. And today we were excited to hear from Raquel Canard and Shun Ogondimu. And Shun can join us today, but something came up and Raquel wasn't able to make it. But maybe Nick, you can tell us a little bit more about the project that Raquel worked on over policing of Black and Brown communities.
Definitely. And so, one of the really incredible things about mapping justice is that it's student driven. We utilize education as a tool for them to really look at their communities, look at their identity, and see how does that intersect with these fields they want to go into. How is an identity such as a Black woman intersecting with GIS, and how can you use GIS to better understand ways that identity correlates with the community around you? For this project with Raquel and another one of her peers, they really wanted to tackle over policing. Raquel did Mapping Justice the summer of 2020. I think we all remember summer of 2020 for so many reasons. But for me, one of the things that came up, especially for me, living in DC, living in this area, was really what is going on around the world of over policing. Raquel and her partner wanted to look to see how can they better understand this issue. They're seeing it on social media. They're seeing it on the news. They're waking up and understanding the injustices that are happening all around the community. Being data minded, being future STEM scientists, engineers, etc., they want to say, what's the qualitative assessment of what's going on, and how can I use GIS to better explore that? So what they did is they really wanted to understand how can they look at the topic of over policing and say, what does the data have to say behind this? And so what they did is they did a survey of over 20 different cities to really understand what is that correlation between policing, race, and class. And so what they wanted to do is really shed light on something that, again, they're seeing the tweets, they're seeing the snippets. They wanted to say, how can I put an analytical view on this issue and better form my own opinion? And it was a really incredible work. From the work that Raquel and her partner did, they were able to really uncover that, yes, there is a clear correlation between over policing race and class. You're able to see that, okay, the presence of that policing as a subject, and especially as you go into the subject of abolition, one of the core tenets is really looking to see that ways that race is a clear driver of some of these outcomes. Through their research and through some of their analytical models, they're able to see that, yes, in communities where you had higher Black populations, you had higher policing. It wasn't necessarily a correlation to an increased crime rate. It wasn't necessarily a correlation to some of these indicators that many may believe, but really they saw that correlation saying that how race and class is going to then determine ways that police have a presence within their communities. They then took that to see that what other patterns that they could extrapolate from these key cities and ways that they dove deeply in it. I wish Raquel was here to really share more of the work that she did back in 2020, but really incredible work. The students come in with really not a background in GIS. Most of them have never used GIS before. So they're learning a lot of data tools. They're learning how do you find data? How do you go about and put it into ArcGIS online? How are you creating maps? And even more powerfully, what is the story that you're hoping to tell? How can I take a stance, understand what's happening in this area in a community, and really understand spatially how can I tell the story of what's happening in this community and what are the ways that demographic, identity, and other indicators intersect with that.
That's really exciting. And we sort of have a sort of has a connection to that very similar experience. So NorthStar was really founded from a grassroots perspective in 2017. And in that 2016, 2017, maybe even that 2015 period of time, and we were just constantly being bombarded in social media, on the news, and email from our friends with imagery of Black folks being brutalized and killed, largely at the hand of law enforcement, occasionally at the hand of their fellow citizens. And it was really hard to be in the space of geography and GIS, when so many of our peers, largely white, just did not know what was going on. You'd come into work with this heavy on your heart and on your mind, and other folks just are not aware, all too often. And at the same time, there were many organizations who were trying really hard to use uh, geospatial data in particular to to understand where their policies were creating racial disparities for their communities, and to understand where they could take action to see a different reality. And very often, ironically, some of those same organizations, some of those same jurisdictions that were experiencing those acts of racial terror and violence in our communities were some of the same jurisdictions that were trying to get access to tools and technique and talent from folks who would help them use GIS to take action. And all too often in our space, equity wasn't a focus, racism wasn't a focus. So we wanted to create a sort of a table of our own where we could talk about these issues and invite others to it. Build a table so strong and so compelling that others would want to join us. And when I think of the Mapping Justice program, it always struck me that that was very similar, right? That you created a space where these issues could be tackled, and so someone who's seeing a challenge in their own experience, whether directly or indirectly through, um, empathy from what they see in the media, can now take this tool set and do something with it to try to create opportunity to drive action, to raise awareness at the very least, and ultimately create more equitable outcomes. I've always been inspired by that part of Mapping Justice.
Thank you for sharing that story. And that's what makes this program so special. I think these are things that the students are already seeing, right? For myself, I was in St. Louis when Ferguson happened in 2014. And so I'm seeing these issues happening in my own community. And for the students, they're going through their lives and they're experiencing what is happening in my community live. But oftentimes they may struggle on, how do I bring it up in a conversation? How do I really understand what's going on? And how do I want maybe even take a step out of my own personal experience and see what's happening systemically, what's happening as an institution, and how are we as a population being affected beyond what I'm seeing. And I think that's through Mapping Justice, they've been able to use GIS as a tool for exploration. Last year, we had a couple students who spoke about, we see gentrification happening in our own neighborhoods, but it's hard to describe, right? But we know that the shops are changing, the demographics are changing. The way it looked when even the way it looked when I was 10 is different from the way it looks now at 17, right? And so by having those conversations, they're able to then see what can we map about this and what can we explore. And so that group of students ended up using GIS to explore what's the pre and post effects of gentrification, and how can you look at demographics, race, and class, other data indicators to show that it's not just what I'm seeing, right? It's not just my qualitative experience. You can quantitatively assess the ways that Black populations are directly impacted by by these effects, by people with power, people making decisions for us. And so for me, Mapping Justice is an attempt to get power back. It's an attempt to really reclaim the conversation and making sure that how can I take a stance to tell my own story and prove to you that this is happening in my community, and then actually take a stance to determine, here's the change that I want to see. And so all the students in Mapping Justice, it's not only telling the story of here's what happened, but take a step towards action. And so they really use mapping and data in order to determine, if I had the hand of someone with power, be it a well-funded nonprofit, be it a mayor, be it an established community organization, what could we do? And how could we orient data, maps, and dashboards in order to help guide institutional power in that way? And so if it's determining, oh, actually, here's a more balanced displacement of police force, right? Here's ways that I can actually see real estate affecting my community. I'm showing the effect. Let's redesign what my community could look like using GIS, and that way they have power in their own hands to really design the communities at their end.
This wasn't the plan for the conversation, but I'm gonna skip ahead and I'm gonna come back in a second to the agenda as we sort of discussed it. But what a part of what you're describing, you describe many things, but a part of what you're describing, not to reinterpret your story, but to sort of highlight a couple of key components there, is this interesting intersection of education, empathy, and entrepreneurship that I see in the program, right? Like there are there are lots of organizations that are taking STEM as STEM education as a tool for equity by teaching people a new tool, a new technique that'll get them into spaces that may change the future, may change the future of their family for generations to come. I see a lot of folks who are creating startups around technology because it's cool, it's fun, and there's lots of things you can do with it. But that intersection of education, entrepreneurship with empathy, right? This interest and focus on equity born out of um, this need to address the things that we experience or that we see differently. For whatever reason, we see it differently from so many others, and being able to create spaces where you can, inspired to do that for all the reasons you described, create a space where other people um, can be inspired, motivated, and equipped to tackle some of the same kinds of issues as they see it from their own vantage points. And and you're particularly focused on underrepresented youth. Now, just as obvious as it may be, just talk to us why you think it's important to focus on underrepresented youth.
Definitely. I think thank you for bringing this up, and I'm so passionate about this topic. I think the reason why we look at underrepresented youth and what that really means is that thinking through the ways that what act what are the spaces and places that we have access to as Black and Brown people, as whatever your identity may be, thinking through whether it's being femme, being queer, be a religious minority in America, right? Thinking through like what representation do I have and what access to power do I have to be myself, to bring in my own perspectives and to contribute to the greater fabric. I think I was really lucky growing up. My dad was an engineer for the state of Texas. My mom was a public school teacher, later counselor. Some would say it's not very surprising that I'm here teaching STEM, kind of the best of both worlds. But in thinking about my passion to make sure that I'm pushing forward, I recognized the potential that I had. And then the educational opportunities that my parent put forward. And I see that as a mission for myself to give back. One thing that you touched on was this idea of economic and social mobility. I don't want to underestimate this, and this is super powerful. Both of my parents came from Nigeria, and they used education and notably STEM degrees to make sure that they had opportunities for their family, and that could make sure that me and my siblings were well resourced, were capable, right, and had a safe place to live. I think that's powerful, and that innately is part of this topic, making sure that how can minority youth, again, defined as you may, have opportunity for education to scale and to tackle and tap into some of these resources that others have had generationally, or it's institutionally protected. And so thinking through the ways that we can make sure that we disperse that. But for me, let's a step further around not only do you have access to this space, are you properly prepared to thrive while there? Do you have the ability to think through that? What does it mean to have a community around us, right? It's not just being the first shaker in the room. Now what, right? You can be the first Black queer person to lead your organization. Then you're alone. You don't have that camaraderie, right? We want to build a circle of community there to where they have each other to depend on. They know what their identity means in this space, and they're aware of the responsibility and power that they have when into those spaces, right? As an engineer, I have power. As a data scientist, you have power. When you're using GIS, you're using this tool to really change how other people are understanding and seeing things, and you're able to guide those conversations. What we do in our class is really think through that when you're learning, you're not just learning GIS for the sake of STEM education. You're learning GIS to solve a problem. You're tackling these issues because there's something that's really important to you, be it over policing, food access, gentrification, educational opportunity, right? You're thinking through these things that are core to me. You want to see a change. You want to see a difference in your community, and you're using GIS to tell that story and to convince others that this is important, and here's how you should prioritize this work.
Um, I you segued in so well. I didn't expect that. But before we talk about like what we at least what we think it means to map responsibly and whose responsibility it is to do so, I just want to say, we at NorthStar we really resonate with the reality that also all too often diversity initiatives result in catapulting people over the wall into spaces where they are alone, with surface level inclusion, and and then what, right? Is the question. And so one of our programs, Bridge, is the idea that instead of a catapult, it's a bridge, and we are supporting you all throughout. We also see ourselves as a network of networks, and we are excited to be plugged into your network. So when we make contact with folks who um, who are underrepresented youth, and we think they can benefit from your program, we are absolutely going to send them your way. And we invite you all to see us as a part of your network, to help provide that support for folks from underrepresented backgrounds in GIS and geography. But the responsibility doesn't begin and end with us. While we absolutely will do what we need to do to create success and carve pathways in the ground for future generations, we have to continuously ask of the broader community, what's the responsibility of map makers and GIS practitioners and GIS companies and leading organizations in creating a more just and equitable world? And I see that at least in two ways. One, in recognizing the reality of systemic and structural racism and so many other intersecting systems of oppression, and do things that go above and beyond your what you may give to others, what you may do to support other communities, to equitably invest where the needs are greatest. So making sure that you are connecting your organization to not quote unquote diverse pipelines. I almost never know what that means, but connect your pipelines to predominantly underrepresented groups serving organizations, communities, and so on. So on that side of things, making sure that you are creating that pipeline, that path for what the future of GIS and geography looks like, and the future of policy making looks like. And then on the other side, you know, should mapping justice be the only program? Should NorthStar GIS be the only programs trying to educate people about how to use GIS to advance justice? What are your thoughts on equity being at the core of geography work, of GIS work, of urban planning and other related work?
Thank you for that. We can't be the only ones doing this. I think one, we're only a couple people. I think there's only so much we can do in this room. But then two, I think it also mistakenly, I think we often fall in this trap of if there needs to be diversity work, if there needs to be equity work, it then falls back on the communities themselves to make sure that they're creating that opportunity. I love doing this work, and this work means the world to me. That being said, we need the work, the effort and time and funds from allies and those who believe in this mission. If you think that this space should be equitable, if you think that GIS should be more diverse, we need work from allies to think through what is your role in making space for others, right? What is your role in making sure that there's a correct pipeline of talent, of diverse, responsible talent into GIS? What is your role in making sure that within your organizations you're thinking through GIS in a responsible way and you're considering the implications of this work, right? Who's in the room? Who isn't in the room? Who needs a seat at the table? And how do we pull up a chair? I think this is the work that we really need to make sure that we're doing. And thinking about mapping responsibly and the way that equity should be rooted in GIS. Forgive me, I feel like I bring everything back to abolition. I study abolition and I really think through the ways that it's related to so many aspects of my personal and professional life. If you want to talk to me about the connection between abolition and innovation, shoot me a message on LinkedIn. But for now, and thinking just about GIS, there are three core tenets to abolition that's really relevant here. One is restoration, two is renovation, and three is imagination. I think whenever I think about what does responsibility mean in this essence, I think about what are you doing across those three boards to push for progress. For restoration, we're thinking about what is the work that has been done to date? How have these communities been marginalized, and how can we tell those stories? And so in the terms of GIS and maps, it's making sure that we're telling those stories, we're bringing those stories to light, we're giving access to where there wasn't access before, and we're making sure that these instances are documented in the best way possible. In terms of renovation, we're thinking about what can we do in the now. We're thinking through how is GIS an active tool in city planning and the allocation of resources and the ways that corporations are placing power and making decisions. What can be done with GIS to inform today's decision making to make sure that outcomes are for the better. And then three, imagination. I think GIS is powerful because you get to tell the story. Let us tell our stories for us. Think through the ways that if a student like Raquel, if a student like Shun can think through what should my community look like? What does equity mean to me in being able to create that future? I think that there's an incredible world of imagination that can be opened using GIS as we're reconfiguring what a future city could look like. Even if you may say, that's really hard to do, that's impossible. Going to them, so many things we've done is impossible, right? Going to the moon was impossible. If you look back on March 2020, the vaccine was very difficult, was impossible. And now we're here. Luckily, I'm not only vaxxed, I'm boosted, right? And so I think if we can work towards it, it's about putting what is that vision forward and making those steps that that we can make progress. I think GIS could be a tool to do that.
Agreed. And I'm gonna want to get back to the notion of next steps. But before we get there, I do want to start to connect with student experiences. And before we get into that conversation, Shun, I want to bring you to the stage and back things up a little bit and give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your project. And as I understand it, fast food influences in school district of Philadelphia. You were looking to visualize concentrations of fast food restaurants near Black and Latin American, predominantly Black and Latin American high schools. Could you talk to us a little bit more about, why you, first of all, welcome to the stage, and let us know why you wanted to do that work, what it meant to you, and what you hope to accomplish in that work.
So, thank you for having me. Over the summer, I actually worked in the mapping justice class, and I worked with a partner, and we developed a map that kind of like analyzed the different locations of fast food within Philadelphia, and then we kind of like made a density cluster like of those fast foods, and then we also plotted like the schools that were around those areas. So we looked at the amount of fast foods that were actually located like near a school within a 5 mile distance. And then from there we actually we developed different clusters of like the density and then layered that over race to see the kind of the connection between this fast food density near schools and also race from the census. So this whole project was inspired by kind of like a lot of different factors. The one thing that I really liked about this class was that I could kind of combine like my passions and also the passions of my partner and just like into kind of a one whole like different project. So my partner was very, very passionate with education. And they really want to center something around the schools. I I had a lot of previous experience with environmentalism with the Urban Garden Initiative, which is a nonprofit that I worked with, um, about kind of like the the academic year before the summer experience. And in there, I kind of got to like meet a lot of different leaders and people who were involved in environmental projects and people who are actually like fighting different environmental issues just abroad. That's within the U.S. and also outside of the U.S. And I really kind of wanted to develop a project that kind of like summarized all of this stuff into one, and I could combine unique passions. And I was very like very interdisciplinary in nature, and that's really what this project was. It kind of looked at like a lot of issues in regards to education, in regards to race, in regards to environmental health, and it really just made like a whole project that was honestly some of the results was a little unexpected, but we also kind of got to kind of like contribute, I guess, to this like passion that we had. And actually, like I guess, display it in a way that was feasible for other people to just like understand exactly why we have this passion and what we're talking about.
Sounds really exciting and motivational. And if you would, I want to spend some time, like I said, talking about student experiences, your experiences, what you felt your cohort was experiencing. I'm curious about, what experiences you had in the program, and what it meant for you to be a part of the program, and how you see the program sort of impacting your future.
Yeah, so in regards to my experience in the program, honestly, at first I did not know what ArcGIS was, and I was completely kind of like in the blue. But when I did the class, I really learned so much, and I actually really kind of transformed the trajectory of now I'm a high school senior. I'm graduating out to college, and I think it's really forming a lot of the stuff that I want to do in college. I feel like I remember just like doing a lot of our like smaller like projects, and I'll kind of like spend like hours on end actually like developing those projects because it was just so interesting. And just being able to like have all this different data and find this different data and then populate it and analyze it was just something that was just like interesting because I could really just analyze any issue that I wanted to. And it really just like sparked my curiosity. It was something that I just ended up like love doing. I remember like my project, I actually worked like hours on end throughout the week just working on it, and I enjoyed every single minute of it because it was honestly just like it was just the development of something that was, I guess, a representation of just what I felt was really important to me and what I really want to focus on. And I think yeah, overall, my experience of mapping justice was honestly, it was honestly transformational. A lot of the stuff that I did within the class, we focused on this aspect of technology, and also in regards to justice. And that's again something that I was not sure that actually happened. I wasn't sure about that connection at all. When I did Tech, I expected it to be very technology focused, very much like within the STEM field. STEM in itself is just it's just STEM, and at the time I kind of thought STEM was only just equations and coding and engineering, and it wasn't anything that actually involved other aspects, and you could like really see the application into society. And that's really what I got out of the class, and it was honestly amazing. It was something that I really could not have expected, and now in college I truly just want to continue exploring more different applications with science and engineering into my own passions, and just kind of like have this discovery. This project kind of use use education and race, two topics I haven't really explored that much. I found a lot of passion in it. I want to continue like having those types of exploration, especially using scientific tools.
And I'm sure that in your experience to date, you probably encountered a lot of those notions that what you're learning in class, it doesn't really matter. This math thing, it doesn't matter. This science stuff, it doesn't matter. It sounds like the mapping justice program took a lot of those capabilities, put it in a context where you could see how it matters. And I'm really, sort of inspired to think, what does it mean if students could earlier in their educational career get exposed to the reality that all those things that you learn in school have the potential to have an impact on your life, and on the lives of others, and on work you would do. All of that stuff that they're teaching you to do are just the building blocks to help, advance some policy, to some program, some agenda. And while some of those things, some of those topics are from corporate commercial perspectives, many of them are about community and government and organizations. Um, so what would you say to other students, who haven't had this opportunity yet to get exposed to STEM in a space where it shows you exactly how you could use it? What would you say to them to help them understand that they too could be a part of a program like Mapping Justice, and with or without Mapping Justice, um, their work in STEM could have an impact on society? What would you say to them?
I mean, I would honestly really promote them to just like join a program that kind of incorporates all these different factors. I would kind of mention like what the program has done for me. I feel like learning kind of like how to apply all these different factors and all of your experiences into one project is something that is like truly unique and truly transformational. I remember I used like a lot of coding into some of the project that I did. Coding, I'm a computer science major in high school, and I never thought that I would actually get the chance to actually apply that because I generally want to like focus more into like the natural sciences. But being able to kind of like take on all these different aspects of all the skills that I've learned, and all the passions I have, and put them into one is an experience that you just truly cannot get anywhere else. And I feel like that's, I guess, what I want to like display to other people who might be interested in this.
And what does that mean to you, Nick, to see the literal living embodiment of your work, expressed so clearly, so vividly, and so passionately?
I mean, it's all the students, right? I just stand in a Zoom room and, and show them some tools in GIS. They do all the hard work, and it's incredible. I remember that I created Mapping Justice because these were the programs that I wanted when I was student age, right? I graduated in college and I studied mechanical engineering, international development, and people said, "How are you balancing these two? They're so separate and they're not related." And to me, I'm studying engineering to do development. This is to me they're intrinsically related because I'm using engineering as a way to solve critical problems in society, and so I wanted to make sure that student section can really see them not only themselves in their work, but they can say I can study computer science, I can study mathematics, I can study engineering. What can I do with this, and reasons how this can for me the driver to study engineering was I'm gaining a tool so I can help my community, so I could create things that are really impactful. If you can learn data science, if you can learn computer science coding in a way that shows you're going to code for justice, you're going to use data for good, for me that's why I do the work.
That's exciting. And both of you, I wanna hear about things you learned. What did you learn, Nick, about creating a program like this that you're gonna take into the future of Trouble and Co?
I learned, well, one, I learned there's no way I can know be an expert at all of these topics. And so that's one of the joys and the cons of Mapping Justice, is that you have incredible students with such a diverse array of topics, right? Shun did looking at fast food and education. You have over policing, you have transportation equity, you have gentrification, you have environmental displacement. One thing that I learned, that there's so many areas out there, but I learned that core to all of this is the approach. How are you, the data sets are going to differ, the populations are differing, the locations are going to be different. But the way that we can take this approach to think through how are we, one, understanding a core problem in this community, going out to assess what data is available, what story can we tell from that and try and make change in that way, I think is universal to the process. And so that's something that's really going to be applicable to mapping justice and the work that we're doing in Trouble and Co. and seeing how can we then create a platform of culturally competent technical education that inherently embeds responsibility and justice, and that you're not only working with these populations to gain this technical skill, you're going to be employable. You're going to be ready for college. I got an email from a student from my 2020 cohort yesterday saying, I'm having a great time in my first year at Yale. I've already been able to use GIS in a research project with a professor to drive and look at socioeconomic opportunities on the continent of Africa. For me, that's showing that I'm gaining the skill and I'm directly applying it. I'm being able to get ahead of my peers and do something that's going to be important to them. Are they going to be a GIS specialist in the future? I never know. But for me, that they're going to understand how are they going to now approach both technical and social problems and see the ways that data can inform that work and the ways that their identity can then drive it.
Sometimes I think about GIS purely as a practice, like a practitioner's practice, and sometimes like once a practitioner, always a practitioner. When you when you see something that a given practice will work on, you'll use it. So I'm excited that you're helping folks like Sion grow their practice of geospatial thinking and geospatial tooling. And for you, Sion, what's when you think about the full 6-week course, what's one thing you learned that you think that was or will be the most impactful for you in the future? Something you can already see yourself coming back to and practicing later.
Yeah, I think that one thing that I learned that was really important was kind of like the fact that science really isn't so linear. It's really something that pulls on kind of like a diverse perspective. Like science is really a representation of society and the most pressing issues that we want to solve. And when you're kind of like learning science and you're taking in all of these skills, it's really important to really just be grounded in having that why. Like, why are you doing this? How do you want to apply it? How can this kind of like improve your own goals and help you kind of mold the future that you kind of want to see? And that's something that this project did, and something that I really strive to kind of like take on throughout my other opportunities. One thing that I do want to highlight is actually I already use a lot of ArcGIS. And currently, I'm working with the government in Newcastle County, and I'm kind of like on this board where we're offering ideas for restructuring the environment and land planning in Newcastle County in Delaware. I'm focusing on Wilmington, which is a major urban city, and I'm kind of like I've used ArcGIS and some of the actual drafts that I use in this class to bring up the topic of having a lot of these fast food places that are actually more dense in areas that are minority or predominantly underserved communities. And a lot of that kind of is like molded a lot of my goals into why I'm actually doing this work and exactly the revisions that I want to see in my own community how we can actually achieve that.
That's exciting. See, once you get a practice, at your fingertips, and the more you exercise, the more you practice that practice, the more inclined you will be to use it. And with something like geospatial technology, geospatial thinking, we're talking about something that we all in this industry understand that it has many applications. But now I'm going to go all the way back to something that you said closer towards the beginning of your response. STEM science is a reflection of society. It's a reflection of the issues that we want to tackle. So when we think about the issues that are being tackled in that take center stage, and how often equity and racial justice is a thing that someone says, oh, well, we got to do climate change right now. We'll do that racism thing later without understanding that if you're not doing the anti-racism thing, you're likely always doing the racism thing in your well-meaning work. Um, so it's good to see that more and more people get inspired to do this work, and I'm hopeful that that both of you will be an inspiration to others who are paying attention today. And I'm looking forward to an opportunity to bring Raquel and maybe other students from the program to the forefront and create space and opportunity for people to see you all and be inspired by you. And I wanna start, talking about, what comes next. And some of this coming next concept, we'll back up a little bit. And so I think we've talked about it a bunch, but let's land it for folks. So what are the steps that comes after the mapping, after the analysis, after you've created understanding of these actions? What comes next, and how do we make sure that people take those next steps?
I think a core part of it is something that you just mentioned. And for me, it's the intersectionality of the work that we do in STEM, right? If you're talking about climate change and you're not talking about racial justice, you're missing the boat. If you're talking about health and even women's health, if you're talking about women's health and you're not talking about Black women, you're missing a key part of the equation. If you're talking about environmental justice, but you're missing the fight for indigenous sovereignty and the indigenous protection of the land, you're missing the boat, right? If you're thinking about these areas of creating change, but not understanding how it intersects with race, gender, class, sexuality, etc., there's whole spectrums that you're gonna miss and tackle, and you're not able to properly really address the situation. As we think about the next steps for justice, it's being for mapping justice, is being able to take that lens of intersectionality and apply it to whatever career that they go into, whether it be urban studies, data science, engineering, medicine. How can you, one, understand the role that identity and justice can play in that field, but then also how are you bringing in the sense of being data informed and data literate into the work that you're doing to really inform these decisions, be it in for social causes or even the private sector. You can work at Google, you can work at these private sector firms and still apply this notion of responsibility and justice in the way that you work to make sure that the products that you make are accessible. The products that you make don't have irreversible or negative damage towards populations who didn't have a choice, right? Thinking through the ways that you're entering these fields and you're really being aware of the power that you have to make change. You might just be one voice, but that voice can be big and powerful. And it's up to you to determine how are you going to use it to affect the communities that you're in. And so for mapping justice and for trouble, really thinking about how do we grow. I've been able to do this class twice now. I really want to think through the ways that this can really grow and expand beyond just working with this one set of students. I think that it can grow to be a platform of really, again, tying in justice and responsibility into culturally competent technical education to make sure that students aren't learning science in a vacuum. They aren't learning STEM and technical skills isolated from the ways that Shun mentioned. It's part of the fabric of society. We want to put that first and foremost into the way that they're learning science and that they're driven by the responsibility that they have to make change. And from that, we're going to have a lot of great social innovation and the way that we're creating future innovators and disruptors.
Amazing. And Xion, we don't need you to talk about necessarily the future of the planet or this work, but we are interested in where do you see Xion 5 to 10 years from now? Where do you see yourself?
Honestly, I see myself in medical school. See myself kind of like studying in that sense, but at the same time, I think I really want to continue taking the stuff that I learned with all these experiences, and tying it into kind of like this overall passion and this overall goal that I want to make. I want to kind of have my own impact, and through social through social justice and my experiences with this class, I've kind of been able to identify that towards environmental health, and specifically focusing on factors in regards to healthcare and how we can improve these environmental health factors. but I kind of want to have more experiences with medical school, with undergraduate education, taking in more concepts and just continuing to build this I guess this frame and this goal for how I can take STEM, and whether it's ArcGIS or other scientific tools, and build more, I guess, applications and more ways that I can make an impact using it.
Sounds great, and I'm excited for your future. As we wrap up, I want to make sure we give opportunity to talk about Trouble and Co. in focus, and how our listeners today and in the replays can support your mission. How can they support the work that you're trying to do, Nick?
Thank you for that. And so we're new, we're early, but we're really seeking partnerships and conversation. So the best way to support is to reach out. If you have an idea of how we can learn how to grow, if you have an idea of, I have a school that I think would really benefit from this. I know of a community center that is craving more of this education, right? Learning for ways that this could grow. Please do reach out. I'll drop a link in the chat for the website, but the website is just trouble.co. TRUBEL.co. You can reach out to me at nick at trouble.co. And that's a great way to start off. What we're focusing right now is what are some of the key partnerships for us to get started and to really think through impactful scale. And so right now we're thinking through what are potential schools or other university partners to really make sure that we're reaching communities first, and then also what are the funding mechanisms for us to really thrive. And so if this is your expertise, or even if you just have an idea, I think I'd love to hear from you. Find some time, you can get some virtual tea and have a chat about this work. And so even if it's just, I have a great map that really identifies what you're talking about, right? Here is GIS in action, making change for the community. Share it with me. I love bringing this work into the students, and so they can see more examples of this work live, so they know that this doesn't happen in isolation. There are more of us. I know that a lot of you out there who are GIS professionals are responsible, socially conscious GIS professionals, and so I want to think about how do I bring that into my work as well, share that with the students, and making sure that we're building an ecosystem of really innovative and conscious disruptors who are using GIS for social change.
You always answer so many of my questions, but I'm going to ask this one anyway, although I feel like I heard it in there. And so, what can the future partners of Trouble and Co. look forward to? What are they getting in a partner that is Trouble and Co.?
Definitely, that's a great question. You're getting a partner that's really committed to making lasting change in these communities. You're getting a team that knows the communities in which we come from. You're getting a team that has implemented STEM in intersectional ways, in ways that have advocated for change. And you're getting a history of implementation, now 2 classes of students like Shun who have learned how to do this work. And so in working with Trouble and Co. and reaching out and supporting us, you're getting a team of folks who are really committed to making sure that what ways are we making sure that this next generation has the tools in their hands, right? I think if we care about change, if we want to make good trouble, some notes on where our name comes from is both from the quote, we need to start some good trouble, then also the quote from Bayard Rustin, we need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers. We know that we naturally disrupt spaces, being Black, brown, queer, femme in these communities that we are institutionally not supposed to be a part of. We're coming into these spaces and we're disrupting. I'm saying we can disrupt for the better. We can bring these tactics and tools to make sure that we are properly equipped to make this change. And I want all of you to be a part of that mission.
Appreciate that. And we want to thank our supporters and sponsors, and we want to encourage all of you who support NorthStar to support Trouble and Co. And we like to think of our supporters as our constellation of giving, impact, and influence. And all of you have been a part of that for us here today, and we want to thank you for that. And we absolutely want to thank all of those out in the audience today for joining us. But I really want to thank you, Nick, and you, Seung, for being that future. Nick, you created a program and you're continuing a program that we know will have a great impact. And Seung, you took a part of that, and you're thinking about ways, and you're already using the technology to create an impact in the future. So we want to thank you all for being who you are and for being with us here today. Thank you so much. And with that, we'll close out the event. Encourage your friends to check out more of our programming and take advantage of the replays if you showed up late. Take care, everyone.